Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining the virtual event entitled Creating a Circular Economy at McGill. I'm Francois Miller, Executive Director of the McGill Office of Sustainability. This online event is part of a series of 3 panels our office is organizing. The 2 others being on carbon footprint and the role of research to foster sustainable communities. These panels allow us to take a deep dive into some of the key elements addressed in McGill's Climate and Sustainability Strategy 2020-2025. So this ambitious yet realistic strategy was endorsed by the Board of Governors on December 10th, 2020. It's the result of a broad consultation process that involved hundreds of students, staff, and faculty members. The strategy includes 3 long-term targets. So to attain a platinum sustainability rating by 2030, to become zero waste by 2035, and to achieve carbon neutrality by 2040. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panelists for this event. So we have Erin Wen, former president of Mealcare McGill, and Mathilde Esminguer, current co-president of Mealcare McGill. They will be speaking about their experience with the student group dedicated to reducing food waste and food insecurity in the Montreal community. For your information, Mealcare collects and redistributes surplus edible foods from cafe, bakeries, cafeterias to homeless shelters and soup kitchens. I'd also like to welcome Kendra Pomeranz. She's the Sustainability and Contract Supervisor for Buildings and Grounds, and she's responsible for overseeing waste management at the downtown campus. Kendra spearheaded several key initiatives aimed at reducing McGill's waste footprint, like launching an educational waste campaign called Rethink React, and standardizing waste signage across the downtown campus. I'd also like to welcome Stéphanie Leclerc. She's the Sustainable Procurement Program Manager for Procurement Services. So her role is to leverage the university's supply chain to support environmental, social, and economic sustainability. Stephanie helped develop McGill's Supplier Code of Conduct and the procedures for managing university assets, all in line with the principles of a circular economy. So welcome everyone, and thank you all for being here. I'll leave the rest of this session in the hands of our facilitator today, Agathe Moreau. She works at the Office of Sustainability, and she was also instrumental in developing the climate and sustainability strategy. So, Agathe.
Thanks so much, François, and thank you all for being here. We're really excited to have you be part of this panel. I just wanted to start with many, of us working remotely in different geographical locations. I just want to take a moment so we can situate ourselves before we dive into the questions that we have prepared for our panelists. So I'm speaking to you today as an uninvited guest on the unceded Indigenous territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe Nation. We honor and recognize the Kanien'kehá:ka, one of the founding nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which our virtual event takes place, and from where I'm currently speaking to you today. As a settler that works in sustainability, it's important to recognize the past, but also ongoing consequences of colonialism, especially with regards to how it influences our perspectives and practices of sustainability. in Tiohtià:ke, or the city of Montreal, in the language of the Kanien'kehá:ka, and across Turtle Island, we're being called to honor the importance of pluralistic views and definitions of sustainability, as each of these contribute to a holistic understanding of our environment. So today, I encourage you and I encourage all of us to increase our awareness of Indigenous traditions by reading and researching about the land we occupy. And our office is in this journey as well. So today, I'm very happy to welcome all of our panelists in exploring some of the key themes of the climate and sustainability strategy. So the three themes that we'll be exploring today are waste management, food system, and procurement. And these three themes are closely linked to our newly adopted long-term target to become zero waste by 2035. So I'd like to I'd like to remind all of the viewers, if you have any questions that you would like to ask our panelists, please be sure to send them at sustainability@mcgill.ca. So again, that's sustainability@mcgill.ca, and we'll take some time at the end of the panel to address your questions. All right, so we're diving right into it. Our guiding question for today's panel is, how can we embed the notion of a circular economy throughout McGill's operations? So just taking a step back here, I'd like maybe to start by asking perhaps Stéphanie, if you can explain to us what a circular economy means within the work that you do at McGill.
Thank you, Agathe, and thanks for the invitation. And hi, everyone. There's many definitions out there about the circular economy, but I think we can say in a nutshell that, and there goes the dog, I'm so sorry. The circular economy is an emergent system that would be reconciling our economic activities, our industrial activities with our planetary boundaries. So what you'll usually hear about a circular economy is, economic activities that are less wasteful, that consume less energy, fewer natural resources. And that is sort of one aspect of it, but it can go as far as to say that economic activities should actually be regenerative. So there's like a wide span of potential definitions, but it's really, I think it's one of the building blocks, if you want, for sustainable development. It's an essential condition, but it's not the sole enabler. Okay, so we have to, I think there's like, most people will recognize that we have to move towards a circular economy, but a circular economy in and of itself is not sufficient to have sustainability emerge overall. But so it's a building block. It's something that's very important. It's something that we are trying to put forth in our activities in procurement services. So we're trying to make sure that, when we look at the university metabolism and all the materials throughput and energy throughput of our university, how can we buy better? How can we have a more benign, if you want, supply chain, generate more positive impact than negative impact? So in the supply chain, but also how we manage what we have. Can we share? Can we reuse? And once we're done with reusing things, is there potential for reuse outside our university as well? And then downstream recycling. So really, I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. But we've been working on this for a little while in procurement services, and of course, other stakeholders at McGill, such as Kendra and Moose and others, we're all cooperating on this, and it's great. It's working well.
Thank you so much, Stéphanie. I really like the notion that you mentioned here of regenerative economies. I think that really pushes the concept even further. And I'd like to ask both Erin and Metsud, if you coming from your experience of working with meal care and kind of ensuring these leadership positions in the student organization, if from your perspective, you would like to add anything of this definition of circular economy and your work within food systems.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us first. Hello, everyone. What we can add on that from the perspective of meal care. So Milk Care is a student club, as was mentioned, that essentially helps to close the loop in the food system. Too often food goes to waste partially or not at all consumed. I think in Canada alone, it's around $50 billion of food that is wasted every year. So we take care of the food that is still fit for consumption and we deliver it to the people that need it most. So we have deliveries between once and twice a week. And we partner with cafeterias and cafes on McGill campus and in Montreal in general to help them reduce their food waste and impact on the environment. So we then redistribute the food to homeless shelters or soup kitchens. I don't know if Erin, you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, for sure. So by embedding principles of circular economy in Meal Care's food redistribution process, we avoid the waste that would have been produced in a traditional linear economy and the associated economic losses, as Mathilde mentioned, while also trying to make optimal use of the resources along McGill's food supply chain. So it means working towards creating a more sustainable food system overall, specifically targeting the waste within McGill's food chain by involving McGill's community members and contributing to alleviating food insecurity in the Montreal community.
Thank you both so much for that. What's really interesting in what you've mentioned so far is, with the circular economy, we're really being pushed to question our current linear model of taking, making, and then disposing, and rethinking how can we think of the things in a more circular way, and how can we move away from extractive processes and really take in mind our planetary boundaries when conceiving products and when using products. And I know that you all work on very different aspects of sustainability on campus. Kendra, your work is related to waste management, Stephanie to sustainable procurement, and Matsud and Erin to food systems and reducing food insecurity. So I'd like to kind of dive in a little bit deeper with all of you here and ask you specifically, what projects are you working on that support a move towards a circular economy, and in which ways does it support a move to a circular economy? So maybe we can start with Kendra, if you want to start us off, and then we can go popcorn style after that.
Okay, perfect. So as others have said, first off, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here with you today for this discussion. So just to give you a bit of background, I'm here from the Buildings and Grounds Department. So we really work, we oversee within facilities management a lot of the day-to-day operations on the campus. And in this case, the most notable one is the custodial services. And so we are dealing with all of the items that are put in the garbage at the end of life part of in the linear economy, the end of life portion. And so we've been trying to attack the waste system from a lot of different angles for years now. And so I think there's kind of three main categories that we can look at. So the first one is kind of behind the scenes and looking at our supply chains, our suppliers. We've worked very closely with procurement and Stephanie's team on this. And where is our waste going? So, okay, when you put something in the recycling or the compost or even in the trash on the McGill campus, what can we do to make sure that we're creating as much transparency about what is happening to those items and how they're being treated? And I would say, for things that unfortunately are still going into the landfill stream, how do we make sure that those are being treated in the most sustainable way with the best practices, but also especially on the recycling side and the compost side, how can we shine a light on what happens when they leave the campus, trying to make sure as much as we can that the recyclers that are receiving that material are indeed recycling it, that it's being turned into new items as close to home as possible. So for example, Stephanie and I last year visited some recycling facilities, same thing on the compost side, looking into what are the different options and how can we keep that, as sustainable and closed loop as possible. Now, if we take a step from there to what's happening actually on the campus. So the next step is, in terms of our infrastructure and our services that we can offer to the campus community. So first of all, it's important that people understand how to sort their waste on campus. So to do that, one of the issues that we had identified was that our infrastructure had improvements to be made in terms of the clarity of what's a recycling bin, what's a paper recycling bin, as well as the access to that infrastructure. So to make sure that we have the proper offering of recycling bins, of compost bins, that people have access to these services. So, I mean, as François mentioned in the introduction, we started out at the baseline with just a signage standardization. That was a really important first step. But now in 2021, we're very excited to be moving forward from there with an actual standardization of the bins themselves. So we're working on a big project over the course of this year to go through. We're starting with the major academic buildings downtown and actually install a standardized multi-stream sorting station on every floor and every hallway, so that wherever you are, you're as close to a recycling bin as you are to a trash can, to make sure that we can encourage people to be putting their items into the recycling supply chain. At the same time, what that allows us to do is also expand access to organic waste management, because of course we need a bin, we need somewhere to put those materials before we can start collecting them. So at the same time, very excitingly, we are expanding compost collection outside of just the McGill cafeterias to actually cover more of our academic and common spaces across the campus. So what you guys can keep an eye out for when things start up again and we're all going back to the McGill campus is we're going to have access to organic waste collection across 8 of our campus buildings, starting with a focus on the lobbies, the common spaces, the high traffic areas, and then over the next couple of years, expanding out from there to cover more buildings and more areas. And then I would say even more important than all of those kind of physical and service-based projects that we're working on is the education side and the engagement side. So from a circular economy perspective, of course, and from any sustainability perspective, reduction is the most important, reduction of waste. You know, in a perfect future world, we wouldn't even need all of this stuff because we wouldn't be producing that waste in the first place. So education and communication and engagement is a really important step to make sure that people know how to sort their waste and how to most importantly avoid that waste. So we've been working closely with the Moose team as well. We had a waste educator team out on the campus last year that was kind of putting that piece in place as well. And that's something that we're really excited to continue going forward.
Nice. I'd like to just follow up with a question on that, Kendra. I find it really interesting that, you know, when we're thinking about waste in more of a circular manner, we need to put in a lot of energy in reducing our waste and reducing our consumption. And I was curious to see if there's any, examples or any projects that come to mind for you that are most impactful in terms of how we can reduce our waste, or, some things that you've seen elsewhere that have inspired you in your own field to carry out your work.
Totally, yeah. So, I mean, I think in terms of waste reduction, my favorite example is actually the work that Stéphanie has been doing for years at McGill in terms of working on redistribution patterns. So obviously, my work has really been focused on improving the end of life. But, and I'm sure Stéphanie will speak more to this later, but her program's looking at, especially for IT equipment, and I know there's also been some talk around furniture that, we have such a big community at McGill, and that many of these items that get to the end of their life before people are just putting them into the trash streams that we're taking care of, to figure out ways to increase the communication network, so that the first step can be to check whether somebody else within the McGill community can use those things. And I know in a lot of cases that they can. And that's such an important step.
Yeah, maybe I'll turn it right away to Stéphanie, and maybe you can tell us a bit more, Stéphanie, about, the work that you've been doing to manage the university assets in a way that we minimize our waste, but also ensure that folks still have what they need to carry out their work. And then after that, I want to turn it over to Erin and Metsid, because I see a lot of great connections there with the work that MailCare is doing. So
sure, I have this feeling that we're all working along the same lines with the same principles and the same niveau d'engagement. I mean, the same excitement, I guess, as Kendra. And that's really great, but like on different levels and with different material flows, right? Which is really cool. So in procurement services, the vision from my bosses earlier on was that, well, you know, we should keep an eye not just on, you know, what we're buying, but also, you know, can we avoid purchases at all? Can we share things? And can we keep an eye also on things leaving the university? So that sort of metabolism that we were looking at. McGill had this policy, like the 4R hierarchy: rethink, reduce, reuse, recycle. That's been in our policies for the longest time. But the operationalization of that, like how do you kick it in, like into your processes and your policies, how, like that was not done for a little while. So we've been doing that, and the way we've been tackling it is by asset category. So because different assets or different types of materials, if you want, are bought by different people, managed by different people. There's different decision-making processes that are involved. You know, like managing a vehicle is not like managing a microscope, or, you know, like, so there's different networks of people, different nodes for decision-making along the way. So we've cut up our assets per categories, and we're going at it so with a life cycle thinking approach. With each asset category, we're sitting in a group, like, with the main stakeholders, figuring out, okay, let's sort of dream the ideal life cycle of this thing at McGill. How can we buy this better from more sustainable suppliers? How can we, who should be authorized to buy this, you know, and should there be minimum standards or sustainability standards that apply? Then who should be ensuring that we have, you know, good maintenance of this thing or not? Can we share it? If someone's no longer using it, what's the process or the authorization process to have it transferred or moved to another user who may need this? And if there's no more use to it at McGill, but it still can be reused, then what are the organizations or the other universities or other institutions or whatnot that could be interested in reusing this even further, if that's the most sustainable option? So that's those are the steps that we're applying to all the different asset categories. We've done IT assets, we've done research assets, but I mean, this is like, it's a mammoth project. You have to realize this is huge, you know? And so, yeah, so we've done IT assets, research assets, vehicles, and we're about to roll out furniture and appliances. And what Kendra was referring to of like the patterns for redeploying things is we had to figure out proper communication channels for making things available. And in the beginning, just a quick story, there was a bit of resistance, you know, from some stakeholders. They said, oh no, we don't want to, you know, favoring reuse is so complicated. We're going to have to hold on to things. We're going to have to wait. You know, we don't have storage space until somebody wants this. But that's not how things have been turning out. We have very simple listservs. And I must say that I borrowed that idea from Concordia. They had one listserv on their IT thing, and it's been working really, really well for us now. So we put the equipment or something on the listserv, and within minutes, somebody in another unit will go and use that. Of course, we have reuse eligibility criteria. We're not redeploying things that it's not sustainable to redeploy because it's too old and it needs, you know, so many upgrades and so on and so forth. Like if it requires too much work also to make it function properly. But so yeah, so those systems, they work very, very easily, and we have not had to figure out storage or things like that. It's very the flow is very quick. The redeployment is very quick, and actually, I mean, I have to say, other universities are kind of impressed with our work that we've been doing in this field. So it's really good.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Stephanie. It's really nice to see all the story and kind of the background work that goes into putting all these systems into place. And if we have time, I'd love to come back to some of the things that you've mentioned, especially in like exploring reuse outside of the university and maybe some of the partnerships that were created. So if we have time, we'll come back to that. But I want to turn it over to Erin and Mathilde. Because you, as Stephanie mentioned, you know, we're all working with different material flows. You've been, you know, your primary material is food. And I'd like for you to tell us a little bit more, you know, how meal care has really been instrumental in reducing our food waste at McGill, and also redistributing that to folks in need. And if you can tell us maybe a bit more about your work around creating awareness about wasted food, and how how that kind of educational portion is really important in creating also a circular notion within our food systems.
So Mathilde gave a pretty good overview of what Meal Care does with the first question, and things are a little bit different now with the pandemic and university closures and everything. But in pre-COVID times, we were partnering with university food vendors, so Royal Victoria College cafeteria, Bishop Mountain Hall cafeteria, snacks, and dispatch. And we would collect the surplus edible food at the end of the week from them and partner with different student volunteer groups such as Drive Safe and individual students. And this was part of our redistribution program to divert this food that would have otherwise gone to waste away from the landfill into the hands of people that needed it in homeless shelters and soup kitchens in our local community. And as you mentioned, the importance of education and awareness around these issues. In order to tackle the waste that traditional linear economies produce, education is also a fundamental pillar of what Meal Care works towards. So by informing people on food insecurity through our different social media platforms and education events that also occurred pre-pandemic, by informing people on the negative impacts of food waste and more sustainable consumption habits, Meal Care also works to empower individuals to better manage and reduce their own food waste. If Mathilde, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, for sure. I can talk about the current situation, which is a bit different than what Erin described, obviously. So, considering the current situation, it is definitely more difficult to operate because the university closed and cafeterias and cafes closed and all of that. So it's more difficult to implement new processes and to build partnerships. But so since, this summer, we really tried to, create these new partnerships, and we opened Meal Care to the wider Montreal community. So I'd say very, very early in the semester, we successfully implemented a partnership with a cafe on Saint Laurent, and then we have contact with other donors, and then we do deliveries from time to time with all donors as well. So I'd say we still managed to deliver food and distribute to the people that need it most, at least once a week since I'd say September. So I mean, we're really proud of being able to continue this work, because especially nowadays it's really important to redistribute this food that would be wasted otherwise. And so in terms of awareness, we also had to redefine our events or the way that we inform people in food insecurity and in food waste. We migrated entirely online with different types of student engagement, from panel discussions to communicating on social media, having tips on how to reduce their own food waste and these types of things. So I would say it's definitely now an adaptation period that hopefully will end soon, but that also taught us a lot about how or what we can do more towards the circular economy and reducing food waste at McGill.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so nice to see and so interesting to see how you've adapted to online, and you've found new partnerships also to keep Meal Care going. That's really, really inspiring. And I want to kind of dive into another subject here still for you, Erin and Mathilde, but looking at food systems, do you, in your opinion and in your work with Meal Care and your knowledge of food insecurities and food systems, do you think that for an institution of our size, a closed loop with food systems would be achievable? And if so, what kind of benefits would come out of such a system? And I know that we're dreaming big here, so.
Well, personally, I think because it is such a big dream, it's definitely a very big challenge. And I've seen over the years from my time at McGill that efforts to close the loop have definitely increased and strengthened through composting, sourcing food more locally and from McDonald Campus Farm, and also through the work that Meal Care does. However, with so many different stakeholders that work in McGill's food system and that supplies McGill with food, it definitely seems like a pretty big challenge to achieve a fully closed loop system. And in order to do so, I believe that the institution's greatest challenge would be to shorten the food supply chain. So with the way in which the university does procure food and the amount of people that it needs to feed, I may be a little pessimistic, but I don't believe it's achievable, at least within the next few years. But I think it's definitely something that the community collectively dreams of and is working towards.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Erin. I believe that this is a challenge, but McGill also has everything it needs, to achieve a closed loop food system. I mean, the most important thing that we have is that we have many smart and innovative students and faculty and staff, that are dedicated to having a long-lasting impact on the community. So I think, everything is possible.
I like that. I think that, you're both so right that it's something that we aspire and dream towards. And I think that there's a lot of good momentum in that sense. And I feel like, and feel free to jump in here, but I feel like the pandemic has also kind of got us really interested in bringing our food systems closer to us and in valuing, direct purchases to the producers or getting closer to our vendors. So I think that it's really something that people have an appetite for and people are looking forward to. So it's really interesting to hear your thoughts on that. We're getting in a question here from Naomi, question for Stephanie. So have you considered buildings as an asset category for sharing, reuse, maintenance, etc.? Or is the sharing application focused more on products? Could that be considered in the future?
That's a great question. Yeah, the buildings for the moment are out of scope of this project, but I know that, having I would say a sound approach to space allocation and the sharing of spaces and so on is something that is looked at from other units in the university. So that I think the objectives that would that we would want to apply to our buildings in terms of circularity are coming about. Like the reflection is there, but not under the asset management program, more like on facilities side and campus and space planning side. But I'm sure that they share the vision.
Awesome, thanks so much. I want to kind of come back to something that Kendra had mentioned earlier, Kendra, and he had mentioned that Stephanie and you had visited different recycling facilities and all of that. I was interested to see if you could speak a bit more to how you kind of apply the circular economy lens when looking at recycling facilities and what kind of things you're looking for when you visit those facilities.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think something important to note is that this is still an initiative that is in progress. So for anyone who's followed kind of recycling industry news over the last few years, as many people have heard, it's been a bit tumultuous. These supply chains that were previously global supply chains, we were shipping a lot of our materials overseas to other countries and kind of washing our hands of them. And as countries have been cracking down on those practices, it's brought to light some maybe some flaws in our waste supply chains, that, you know, people like to, you put it in the bin, it's out of sight, out of mind, and we're not necessarily going further down to see what's happening to those materials, and are people doing with them what we think they're doing with them, actually. So something that we've been working on at McGill has been, how can we put in place, you know, mostly through our contracts with vendors that are taking these materials, different measures that allows us to get as much transparency as is possible. You know, this is a big shift kind of in the mindset towards this industry. So we've been trying to be a bit innovative there. So, you know, in terms of the visiting of recycling centers, we essentially drafted a list from talking to various experts of, you know, what would be considered the best practices for a recycler within, you know, the current limitations of the market. So, you know, we brought with us even, you know, myself, Stephanie, we had people from environmental health and safety as well that were there to look at, you know, do they follow the best practices? The way that these materials are sorted, is this something that would make them viable for the local market, so that we can, as much as possible, try to make sure that our stuff is not being shipped away, that, you know, can we get some tracking on where it's going and what it's turning into, and, you know, that these recycling practices are being followed. And then also on the health and safety side, to make sure that in terms of, you know, treatment of employees and making sure that the safety features or safety measures are being followed, given that these are big industrial operations. I think something to note is that, unfortunately, the pandemic has put some delays in terms of us getting to a place, which is our ultimate goal of being able to say, we know where all of our recycling is going and what's happening to it. That's something that we're working towards, you know, over the course of the year. We actually have a project going on now with some students from the management faculty, digging even deeper into that and figuring out what's going to be possible to improve the supply chain. Yeah, it's been an exciting project, and you know, our goal is that when people put something into the recycling bin at McGill, that they can feel confident that that is going to be recycled. So
yeah, and it's so neat that you've done the journey all the way to where the recycling ends up, and kind of seeing what that part of the story looks like, and not, you know, just the part that, okay, it's out of sight, out of mind, but kind of backtracking and seeing what, you know, what story does this plastic container go once it's, you know, once it's disposed, where did it go afterwards, and how is it disposed, and all of that is super, super neat.
And I think from education too, it's yeah.
If I can add to that, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
So what Kendra and I found also was that there was a wide discrepancy between, you know, different suppliers and different service companies. And what we found is that one of them, for example, we were just, I mean, almost flabbergasted by their approach. They had the website, and you could see in almost real time where the waste downstream, like after the sorting, where this plastic was going, where this metal was going, where this type like of aluminum was going. And we thought that was amazing, you know. But just McGill, in spite of how big we are as a university and how much waste we generate, unfortunately, it just that us asking other suppliers to do the same is kind of overwhelming. It's you know, it's not very efficient. So we are collaborating with other universities and other institutions because they have the same ambition as us, right? And so if we can, you know, share what we've seen and what we want to see more of, and if we keep the pressure when we go to the market in terms of procuring for some of these services, and we put that in there, you know, like, this is what we want. This is the kind of transparency that we want. If we ask for that, if Sherbrooke asks for that, and Laval and Concordia and Université de Montréal and others, then that will drive change, you know? So we have this issue with all sorts of different types of waste, and even also with the construction materials, waste and construction and renovation waste. So that's also really important for us to know where all of this is going and how it's being managed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really neat that, and I think there's such a force between having a network of universities that, you know, agree to put pressure on the industry so it shifts their practice. I think that there's a lot of leverage there, and it's neat that, you know, we're using that leverage to shape better practices in the industry. So we have a few minutes left here, and I have one last question for you here, kind of, related to COVID, because that's what's on a lot of our minds right now. But I'd like to ask you, and maybe Erin and Matsid, from your experience, you could speak to this, but do you feel like COVID-19 has made a case for the circular economy? And do you feel like it has, within our food systems kind of created more awareness, or people kind of looking into procuring their food closer to home, or trying to reduce their waste at home? So have you seen any kind of shifts there happening?
I can speak. Well, since I'm not currently working with Meal Care anymore, I can't really speak to what projects are happening there, but I think from my own experience working on sustainability and with regards to food systems and the pandemic, I've seen the notion of the community and the collective definitely strengthened throughout this. And I think with food systems, there has been more of a turn towards reorienting where we are sourcing our food and having more consciousness of what impacts our consumption does have, and just more mutual aid going towards the community and helping people who are facing greater barriers to access food during these times. I think in terms of general impact, people are more aware of these things because we have more time to be on our screens, and just a lot of news and different things have come out of this pandemic and staying at home. But in terms of the actual work that's happening, maybe Mathilde, you want to speak more on that?
Yeah, I mean, to build on what you said, maybe from the donor, perspective, so restaurants and bakeries and all that, the way that, our countries and cities just stopped, from one day to the next because of lockdowns and all of that, I think it made many people realize, the waste, and because they had so much food left on their hands that, they didn't have anything to do with it. So it was great seeing the engagement that followed from this, and I have this food, I have this kitchen, this fridge full of stuff. How can I get it to the people that are dealing with the same issue as me, but from the other side, because they don't have any food? So I think it was, if COVID brought something about food systems, that would be this, and I think this is, I mean, it's definitely something that people had to realize, and that COVID helped, in the sense.
Yeah, it definitely helped change our perspective on a lot of different things. So we have 3 minutes left, 2 minutes left actually. So just quickly to before I go on with my little conclusion, I wanted to see if any of you would like to share what you're most excited about in the climate and sustainability strategy, some projects that you're really excited to see happen on campus, or things that you're looking forward to, perhaps your own involvement in that project. So I'll leave the floor open, whoever wants to jump in first.
I'd love to speak to that. So something that I was very involved with in the new strategy was McGill's new zero waste campus goal, which was mentioned at the top. So that we're putting in place some quantified targets in terms of having a 60% waste diversion rate from landfill by 2025, and then a 90% by 2035. I think that's such an exciting, forward momentum to the work that we've been doing. And so that's been really rewarding to see that go in place, and I'm excited to keep moving forward.
Yay, thanks so much, Kendra. Excited for it too. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, something that I'm really happy about the strategy is how it embeds, long-term targets such as the zero waste by 2035 target. So again, this would definitely be a challenge considering the size and the numerous activities of McGill. But I believe that through stakeholder engagement and sound and daring policies, McGill will be able to considerably reduce their waste. And there's also this the category objectives for the strategy. So I've seen that there are at least 3 out of 8 of them that are related to MilCare's activities. So waste management, food systems, and procurement. And that really shows that the topics that are central to MilCare are also of the utmost importance for the university. And so I mean, this makes me hopeful for the future, and also certain that McGill will support even more clubs like MilCare.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Message. So I'm going to wrap it up real quick by saying to all of our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in, and to all of you panelists, really thank you so much for your time. It was great to chat with you. I feel like we could have, kept going and kept having these conversations, a lot of interesting projects going on. So thanks a lot for your time. And just let you know, there's many different ways to get involved in bringing this strategy to life. If you check out the strategy, we've highlighted some ways that students, staff, and faculty can get involved. That's just a starting point. There's so many other ways that you can take part in the movement. And we'll be hosting 2 more panels, just like this one that will happen on February 11th from noon to noon 45. And we'll look into McGill's carbon footprint and ways that we're taking to reduce our carbon footprint. And our last panel of this series will be held on February 25th, and we'll look at the role of research and education in fostering sustainable communities. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time, and we'll speak very soon.